world view to the diocesan national view, and now I'm going to go to the one particular parish. So I'll share my screen and begin.
You didn't say anything because I have my hands full.
So greetings to everyone, wherever you are in the world, and you certainly are all over it. And I'm really grateful to have a chance to tell you the story of All Saints Episcopal Church. It's located on the north side of Chicago in Illinois. And so for many years, I've had the privilege of consulting for and being part of the community that has been so welcoming of me as a professor, a liturgist, a liturgical scholar, a communications and media professional, and a Roman Catholic. So today I'll be sharing the evolution of this small faith community's efforts to respond to COVID-19, the pandemic closures, by offering worship via a variety of media production methods, the Facebook Live and Premiere platforms, and the generous time and skill of its parishioners and clergy.
My sister went.
I think somebody's not mute. So this is a case study of a small parish. It has served the community since 1884, and it's part of the Episcopal Church, which is a member of the worldwide Anglican Communion. And what I'll share today is informed by a variety of perspectives and voices. It includes an extensive interviews with the two clergy and the director of music ministry, the parish's own online virtual worship survey that 41 parishioners chose to complete, deeper conversations I've had via email with 14 parishioners on their experiences of worship over 20 weeks. My own experience as a worshiper, my own involvement as a volunteer for the worship committee and the choir, my own media production projects that have been called upon for Holy Week, and my serving as an occasional media consultant to the pastoral leadership. And I plan to continue to follow this story as time goes on, because it is going to continue to go on. Now, what's important to know is that this space in particular, that is the church, is a little unusual. The interior arrangement is what's called in the field of proxemics sociopedal rather than sociocentrifugal, that it brings people in. It brings them together, physically creates a space that embraces them, that lets them see each other's faces and allows for easy movement of everyone. The interior, many years ago, the parishioners unbolted the pews and rearranged them in a diamond shape around a movable wooden altar in the center with two presider seats at the left and the reading desk at the right. The choir sings from the chancel, but may also sing from a variety of spaces around the church as needed. There's a baptismal font, but it's in the immediate left corner, and it's so cramped that it's not used because baptisms are held in the center of the church with a large bowl of water and oil so that the whole assembly can be a part of that liturgy. Now, many years ago, the church was destined to be closed, but the young priest sent to close it instead brought it to life. Her name is the Reverend Bonnie A. Perry, and over time she earned her Doctor of Ministry in Congregational Development. So for 27 years as rector, she recruited, attracted, and empowered fellow associates and the laity, including children, to take on leadership roles, to try new approaches, and to be collaborating decision makers. But February 2019, she was ordained the Right Reverend Dr. Bonnie A. Perry, Bishop of Michigan, the Episcopal Diocese that includes Detroit and the southeast portion of that state. The day she was elected was the very first day of our new associate rector, the Reverend Andrew Rutledge. And he suddenly found himself with a very challenging start to his new parish ministry. All of this meant that the parish was about to embark into a rector search that's likely to take 12 to 18 months before we will call the replacement for Bonnie. Now, over the course of almost 3 decades under Bonnie's leadership, All Saints became known for its innovative liturgies, excellent sermons, active lay involvement, and support of ministry in disadvantaged places in Africa, Mexico, and the US. And All Saints has well earned a reputation for its leadership and parishioners' sense of fun and play. And even the adults at the annual meeting get into the act, which, by the way, those meetings are an amazingly entertaining event not to be missed. But it's been a church whose people are very serious also about their commitments to promoting social justice, protesting and marching through the city to bring attention to the need to reduce gun violence, protecting and supporting migrants and immigrants and refugees, and supporting and fighting for LGBTQ folk. So it is a very, very active church that is living now into being a truly anti-racist, beloved community. Now, it's important to realize that this is an intentional community, and most parishioners were not raised Episcopalian. Many of them come from the Roman Catholic Church, Methodist, Congregationalist, Presbyterian, Baptist, Free Church, and other traditions, or no traditions at all. Black Lives Matter has been very important to our community, even though its parishioners are predominantly Euro-American. 149 parishioners down at the bottom right in this picture showed up for a major rally to find solutions to the lack of housing and opportunity for African Americans, Chicagoans, especially in the city's west side. Ours was the largest contingent at that meeting with the mayor. The parish self-description on Facebook reads, as you can see, All Saints is a loving, welcoming, inclusive, and prayerful Christian community in the Anglican Communion, which celebrates and embodies the love of God for all people in and outside of our church community. And I can attest that this statement is true. Now, All Saints also sponsors a major nonprofit that operates out of the church. Volunteers each week provide groceries and other supplies, an average to 210 households a week in 2019. Volunteers also prepare hot, nutritious meals to an average of 90 neighbors as well. And twice a year, each time, this group offers a white tablecloth, restaurant-style dinner designed by a chef. But there's also other services that Ravenswood Community Service offers, and Ravenswood is the neighborhood that this church is a part of. There's also a monthly nurses clinic, social service outreach, a mobile pantry each month, and a hat and glove drive before winter. Now, these services have continued during the pandemic closure of the church, although now people pick up their groceries on the sidewalk. Now, I mention all of this background so you can appreciate how alive and active is this faith community. Average Sunday worship attendance at this pre-COVID-19 was around 300 or so people, with about 60% being families with parents both gay and straight. And the average age of congregants is 37 years old, which I'm told is an unusual statistic. The average age of newcomers is between 25 and 35, with a growing number of trans parishioners, and the parish includes up to 30% LGBTQ parishioners. So into this lively community arrived the interim rector, the Reverend Dr. Stephen Applegate. Mid-February, he came to help All Saints prepare to call a new rector. So Sunday, February 23rd, was his first Sunday to preside, and it was the last Sunday before the start of Lent. 3 weeks later, COVID-19 hit Chicago, and as of March 15th, Bishop Jeffrey Lee called for all Episcopalians stay home from church beginning this Sunday. So week one, what happened? We began an adventure in offering Sunday liturgy online via social media. In the following slides, you'll see probably the messiest slides I have ever created, because the story of All Saints is really complicated and multi-layered, but I want you to hear from the parishioners about their new way of worshiping from home. The parish quickly created a new section in its website, spreading hope in quarantine, socially distant, never alone. It provided information, helpful resources, ways to receive pastoral care, and links to the worship online and to the worship aid to support that worship. So there, on that first Sunday, Reverend Andrew used a skill he'd been developing for so many months since he arrived at All Saints. For those morning prayers, he took his iPhone, put it on a choir stand, and live streamed morning prayer on Facebook. So he knew how to do that. But on that Sunday, in an empty church, the clergy placed that iPhone on a tripod and did the best they could to choreograph celebrating the Eucharist with no physical assembly other than the clergy. But the Facebook comments, as you could see, give plenty of evidence that the assembly was indeed present. Worshippers posted 223 comments, including Michelle May saying, "Love how we're still coming late to church," a joke particularly about the 11 o'clock service, but an example of the playful humor that would continue week after week in these comments. Mark Ballard called out, "I'm singing the bass part, anyone else singing along?" However, he was having troubles with his iPhone audio, and Jacqueline Wayne Smith notes that the clanking radiators didn't help. Despite the technical challenges, people were praying, sending love and peace and well wishes via their comments and the 103 emojis. And the emojis and comments have continued for the last 21 weeks to be critically important to people feeling that they are present to each other. The peak Facebook Live statistic of 1.6 thousand views gave the parish leadership evidence that an estimated 308 adults and children were probably watching that first online liturgy. And some of them had prepared beforehand by laying out in front of them special tablecloths, bringing out special china and cups for homemade bread and wine, candles, and a book of common prayer. Interim Rector Stephen Applegate explained why the pastoral team chose to celebrate Eucharist and not, as many other Episcopal churches were doing, morning prayer or anti-communion. He said, "All Saints Sunday services before the pandemic were all Holy Eucharist. As we discussed what we were going to do as a staff, we wanted a pastoral response to the uncertainty, fear, and loss that we anticipated people were going to be feeling. We did not feel that we ought to change the form of the Sunday service. It was primarily a pastoral response. Since our main concern was sustaining community, we recognize that worship is what the church does more than anything else to sustain the body. And we thought that changing to something different, like morning prayer or anti-communion, was not the right pastoral response, regardless of what some Eucharistic theologians were saying." Immediately after that liturgy, the parish leadership got another shocking instruction from the bishop. No parish was to broadcast from their empty church, and Eucharist could not be celebrated if there were not two people present. Well, fortunately, Stephen's wife Terry had come to Chicago from their home in Ohio to be with him during the pandemic, and the two of them made a great team. Since they had previously been in the folk and country groups, and she had continued to sing in choirs with a lovely soprano voice, and Stephen had brought his guitar. Because they were together in that one space, we as a parish were together. We were able to celebrate Eucharist virtually from the parish dining room. And Terry, a first grade art-loving teacher, quickly created faux stained glass on the dining room French doors to reflect the sanctuary's late 19th century geometric stained glass. As we go now week by week tracking the evolution in All Saints offering virtual worship, I will show you, but I will not always read out the comments on these slides. I'm providing them to keep us aware that this community continued to be active in whatever way they could. For example, as liturgy began, longtime parishioner Margaret McCammon posted, "Good morning, everyone. I've been looking forward to this gathering." Other morning greetings likewise floated in. Jennifer Simakaitis wrote, "Thanks to all for attending and holding this community together." Nick Hatzis, always known as a comedian, admitted, "Entering quietly with some reverence because I have arrived late and in the middle of a reading." That next Sunday, worshipers posted 234 comments and 102 emojis. Facebook Live counted 1.3 thousand views, the equivalent of 356 people attending worship. And Paula Stevens-Conti again posted a photo that showed that she was a little more prepared for the shared table this morning. Bread made from homemade sourdough starter. Yay, it worked. With altar of elements, fire, earth, air, and water. Now, interim pastor Stephen explained to me that the staff had intentionally provided no explicit instructions. People's laying out bread and wine seems to have been a spontaneous response. I learned about it fairly quickly through Facebook. I never addressed the issue, whether people should or shouldn't do that, or what was happening when they received bread and wine. The important thing to me was and is that people are being fed through these services, and that they feel a sense of closeness and connection to God and to one another by participating. By week 3, well, technical glitches meant the first 8 minutes of the service were, as you can see from the first image, portrait instead of landscape. But parishioner Ann Kerrigan helped out Father Stephen. She gave helpful advice. She said, sometimes, even if the camera's horizontal, you have to stop, turn it, and turn back. Her quick technical advice is representative of many postings over the weeks. Whenever people are having trouble with frozen screens or poor audio, they actively helped each other out via the comments. This third week, Associate Rector Andrew preached via a pre-recorded sermon that Stephen and Terry showed via a TV screen that we saw them physically place on the dining room table with their iPhone directed at the screen. As was also the case during the coming weeks, the preacher got encouraging words via the comments. This from Diane Doran. "Andrew, this is beautiful. I'm weeping." I'm still hearing somebody doesn't have the mic muted. Parishioners posted on Facebook again how they were preparing for Eucharist with homemade bread, wine, and juice, special cups or chalices, special cloths, and even connecting their computers to their larger TV monitors to offer a larger view of their families assembled. Parishioner Tony Swain had reported, "I set up the largest screen in my house for the broadcast so that it was as immersive as possible." Now, media professionals like many of you know the wisdom of this effort. Scale matters when encountering media, whether on a screen or via projection. Our bodies respond differently. From the very beginning of this adventure in virtual worship, I have often thought about the research of Daniel Dayan and Elihu Katz reported in their 1992 book, Media Events, The Live Broadcasting of History. They recounted how viewers of royal weddings would dress up and prepare tea to celebrate with friends, and how they truly felt they were participating in those events, despite their being just looking at a TV set. Even though today we are talking about internet-enabled live streaming on a variety of different sized devices, not about TV broadcasting, we have much to learn from these researchers. Every faith community that transmits a video and audio feed of a worship service is part of a new form of broadcasting live history in the making, our religious history. On that third Sunday of online worship, despite the technical glitches from the high demand of too many churches trying to go live stream and broadcast their pre-recorded worship online, All Saints worshipers didn't give up easily. In their 146 comments, they cheered on their liturgical leaders. They responded to prayers with their posted amens and thanks be to God. They offered love and encouragement to all through their little floating hearts and thumbs up emojis. Some viewers turned out to be former parishioners, tuning in from far away, like Leslie Marina, who said it was so nice to be able to come back home. Inspired by the practices of other churches, All Saints Associate Rector Andrew Rutledge, who has since become the de facto parish media producer, invited people to send in photos of themselves. The staff printed them out, hung them with pipe cleaners on the pews, and even managed to put some photos right where people usually sat pre-COVID-19. A parish volunteer, Mike Kurtz, has offered his assistance at audio editing so that the choir members could record their individual parts, and he could then blend those together, the separated sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses into an almost harmonious choral sound. In talking with our choir directors, our director of music ministries, Colin Collette, has discovered that most media resource limited parishes don't have a talented audio editor available. So they limit their service music to live or recorded organ instrumentals or a soloist or canned music, or they reuse their own recordings from previous video recorded concerts or other events. By week 4 of the COVID-19 lockdown, the pastoral staff and many parishioners and volunteers were engaged behind the scenes for a real push to get everything ready for Holy Week. A Lenten Taizé service that Colin and his spouse Will conducted from their home got 421 views, indicating an unusually high attendance, no matter how you translated those Facebook Live views into an estimate of the number of people attending. He said, usually we get maybe 20 to 30 people for this service, but look at the number of people who came by when the service went online. As one can see by scanning the comments, worshipers felt comfortable requesting prayers for their families, including those on the front lines in the pandemic medical response, and for those sheltering in crowded conditions, and those who had to shelter alone. And before we hardly knew it, it was Palm Sunday. How, via media, could we offer the dynamic equivalent of a Palm Sunday procession? The worship team wondered. Well, with help from staff member Andrew Freeman, Reverend Andrew edited together a series of photos by parishioner Charlie Semakaitis, who is a professional photographer. And they took pictures of worshipers vicariously, showing the joy-filled parish hall gathering, the people going down the street, around the corner, and up the steps, into the sanctuary that was already throbbing with music. So here are some of the images that were skillfully edited to the choir's recording of "We Are Marching in the Light of God." And his was a video, but I'll just show you some of the screens. I consider this dynamic equivalence. How can we make a procession in a way that people experience movement? Heather Foote joked, "Good morning, all." Is the choir lined up? Greetings on this April 4th, streamed in via the comments, welcoming people, sending love, giving thanks, and complimenting the people involved. In my home and others, the table was appropriately set for Eucharist. Interim Rector Stephen noted, "We have purposely been vague about what is happening when the Eucharist is being distributed at one end of the camera, computer, or handheld device. I see this as consistent with Anglican Episcopal Eucharistic theology, which, while believing in the real presence of Christ in the sacrament, is agnostic about how that happens. I find that people, and by this I include some bishops, are uncomfortable with mystery. Who knows what happens, and who can say what happens?" The young children in the Doran and Capitan households knew it was a very special day on that Palm Sunday, and they prepared accordingly with crayon-colored printed palms. Young Powell helped prepare the communion bread while older brother Willem made palm branches. Their mom, Christina, explained about the cardboard church that you're looking at. She said, Willem and I made our own little All Saints. Willem made the bread with a few additions from Mom. From instructions he was taught in the Catechesis of the Good Shepherd atrium lesson on the parable of leaven. We fashioned the stained glass windows from glitter paper, and Willem added the little blue air pump on the side because it makes noise, just like the radiators in church, he said. The pre-recorded Wednesday Tenebrae service and Holy Week came together online thanks to the leadership and talents of multiple parishioners who read poetry, prayer, and scripture, and to which Associate Reverend Andrew added religious images and photography. I was part of a 4-woman team that led the pre-recorded Stations of the Cross, streamed over Facebook at noon on Good Friday. We recorded the liturgical text together on Zoom to create the voiceover to accompany images of the station that parish children, that on the left there, had made long ago and were hung annually in the sanctuary, along with artwork from many periods of history and contemporary photography. People could watch this devotional service as it was first shown on Facebook Live and later on Facebook and YouTube. As always, worshipers like Laura Graf Hanna were clear about what they were doing. She said, joining you in worship. Michael Safranek, who said he was hearing impaired, was especially glad to read along with the bulletin. I was not able to understand the lyrics of the song as played, but All Saints liturgies are always accompanied by printed worship aids that are now provided as PDF files ahead of time and posted on the parish website. For the Good Friday evening liturgy of the Passion and Veneration of the Cross, All Saints once again translated dynamically what was best of the parish's usual liturgies. It's welcoming of talented people to share their gifts. Playwright Paula Conti-Stevens, with the purple background there, led the cast of the All Saints players in performing via Zoom an original play that she had written, entitled The Way. Through the dramatic presentation, they told the story of Jesus' final days in Passion as recorded and recalled by Mary Magdalene. Music director Colin Collette led the service from his home. The parish choir members had already contributed their parts for the singing of Were You There, When They Crucified My Lord. And at the end, worshipers could venerate a cross in their own home or view an 8-minute video of a cross being held and extremely slowly lifted up as they heard Barbara's haunting adagio for strings. The Easter Vigil was as fully celebrated as it would have been had we been physically in the church, but not being able to have baptisms made many of us very sad. Nonetheless, the All Saints players once again gave beautifully nuanced interpretations and reinterpretations of the creation story in 3 other readings. Those of us who watched the full pre-recorded service were engaged in the liturgical action, including lighting our own candle at home, ringing our own bell for the Gloria, listening and singing with the parish choir, and responding to invitations to prayer, to do ritual gestures and postures and other kinds of participation. I admit, telling you this story week by week, I feel so limited in trying to express even my own experience of the Easter Triduum and all these other liturgies. I want you to hear their voices. I want you to hear the choir. I want you to hear the powerful preaching. I want you to marvel with me at the actors' rich interpretation of poetry, scripture, and original drama. Now, as all of you, and all of it was now seamlessly edited by Associate Pastor Andrew Rutledge, week after week. He describes his spending 2.5 or more hours each Saturday editing together all the pre-recorded parts submitted to him by Saturday. He calls it a very prayerful experience. He wrote and told me, when I produce the pre-recorded sections into one liturgy, I feel it is a spiritual act. I am engaged in deep meditation as I'm making the video and trying to achieve the same kind of flow we always want for any kind of good liturgy, live or recorded. I truly feel I'm privileged to do this work. It is a very prayerful experience, part of the whole worship experience for me. And though it is painstaking, I have to listen and pay careful attention to what is going on as I'm creating the experience for the community. I approach this editing so that people can have a prayerful experience. So I have got to give it my utmost focused attention. Easter Sunday Eucharist found interim rector Stephen and wife Terry fully back in the rectory dining room, serving their multiple liturgical roles. Reverend Andrew preached via a recording, showed once again via a TV monitor placed on the dining room table with the iPhone turned to it. As you can see through the notes on the bottom here, the comments, the community was very active in sharing its Easter greetings with one another with 224 comments. The 784 views can be interpreted as representing perhaps 300 or more people participating in the liturgy at various points. From March 15th to April 6th, here we are. Most of the online liturgies were streamlined via Facebook Live, with portions of the Liturgy of the Word reading, sermons, and the choir singing pre-recorded and being shown on that live dining room TV monitor. But given the problems of social media transmission interruptions and parishioners' internet speeds being taxed too much, the pastoral team gradually moved all pre-recorded liturgies, and so that there were no more live liturgies, even though the pre-recorded liturgies were live streamed. In my research conducted 20 weeks into this new way of doing worship, parishioners told me it didn't matter to them. What did matter to them was the live sharing with each other via the comments and floating emojis. On that second Sunday of Easter, All Saints returned to a practice of recognizing birthdays and anniversaries by inviting people to post their special dates in the comment sessions, and they did, as they heard and joined in singing the song we always sing each month, God grant them many years. The following week, Terry Applegate used her arts and crafts skills to fill the rectory dining room with a race course all around the room and photos of parishioners along the path as its audience. Now, typically this would have been the Sunday for the Ravenswood 5K run that the parish sponsored. It was a big fundraiser for the food pantry with hot meals and other services of the Ravenswood Community Services Program. Typically, this was a Sunday when even the liturgical team would run or at least show up to church in running shoes and race t-shirts and raise tons of money. Nonetheless, people did give and were terribly generous to RCS. Unfortunately, with so many churches overloading Facebook Live and Premiere, though, some worshipers, as you can tell from one of the comments, were still experiencing some technical glitches. By week 9, May 3rd, the creative production team had figured out how to offer a dynamic equivalent of the monthly birthday and anniversary celebrations, which is such an important thing to the people of All Saints. They invited people to submit photos or used ones already submitted and edited together a beautiful montage of young and old alike. Gina Shropshire commented, "This is making me cry. Love your beautiful faces." With week 10 being Mother's Day, Terry Applegate once again decorated the dining room, and as many mothers as possible played their roles as presider, readers, and intercessors for the prayers of the people. By week 11 in mid-May, it was the 6th Sunday of the Easter season. That liturgy celebrated all of creation, and we prayed for greater care of the earth. Reinforcing that focus, of course, was Terry Applegate's floral arrangement on the wall, nature decorations, and as you can see, Reverend Andrew presiding beside a farm field near his home. People reported that they loved how the liturgy got liberated from the indoors to the great outdoors. They so wished they could be sprung as well. The celebration of the Feast of the Ascension was transferred to the seventh Sunday of Easter on May 24th. Lay readers continued to produce and submit their own videos, including a mother and daughter who offered the prayers of the people. But in addition to the horrors of the pandemic, people were becoming more and more aware of the horrors visited upon people of color. The killing of unarmed Ahmed Arbery, who was simply jogging in Georgia, and the police killing of Breonna Taylor in her own home made everyone who watched news become painfully aware of violence against African Americans. It broke the hearts of so many. The Black Lives Matter movement leaders were strategizing for how to react on a larger scale. While at All Saints, Elizabeth Moriarty on the right there, who is a community organizer, invited people to consider how they could do more about police brutality and systemic racism in society in general and in Chicago in particular. The next day, May 25th, Minneapolis police killed unarmed George Floyd. Pentecost at All Saints was as big a celebration as the parish always tried to make it, with Terry Applegate's Pentecost Spirit Decoration, with readers like Filipino-American Josephine Cook offering scripture in Tagalog and English, and the choir singing spirited songs, and of course, Veni Sancti Spiritus. Reverend Andrews stood by a stream to pray for the Spirit to blow through our world ravaged by the pandemic and racism. From the death of George Floyd, sermons at All Saints took on the sins of racial injustice, the realities of privileged whiteness, and the importance of taking action in support of Black Lives Matter's protests. In a Zoom conversation that 40 parishioners attended, Elizabeth Moriarty introduced the concept of a greenlining campaign to invest in Black communities who for decades had suffered from housing redlining. She proposed a bold goal: to raise $215,000 in 4 weeks to help build a model home in North Lawndale, a devastated part of the west side of Chicago, and to train a community organizer for a project that will eventually build 1,000 homes. Because it was the first Sunday of the month, worshipers also enjoyed another montage of birthday and anniversary special people. This had become one of the favorite moments in their online liturgies. People loved seeing the faces of people they knew and even those they didn't. Now remember, this is a church that had been celebrating in face-to-face, literally, for years and years and years. From their home, they celebrated them all. Youth Sunday came the next week. And it's always a lively day at All Saints. Children, teens, and high schoolers take on most of the liturgical leadership roles, and this year was no different. They recorded their readings from their homes and their backyards, and little ones sang a lively Alleluia, including gestures and with great joy-filled abandon. The children wrote and read the prayers of the people, during which they prayed for those caring for the sick suffering from the pandemic, for schools to be safe when they hope to return in the fall, and for all who were protesting in the streets that they may be safe. A high school senior, Olivia, gave an impassioned sermon about racial injustice and her own awakening to systemic and institutional discrimination of people of color. As parishioner Paula Morrow commented, "I needed that sermon. Thank you, Olivia." For the June 21st liturgy, All Saints paid special attention on that World Refugee Sunday to refugees like the Bible's Hagar and Ishmael, who could never go home. Laura Youngblood, a parishioner who was a director of the Middle Eastern Immigrant and Refugee Alliance, preached a powerful sermon about the refugees she had come to know and serve. Reverend Andrew decided to read scripture standing on railroad tracks to reference refugees and immigrants in flight, but he told me this turned out to be a mistake. He said, "For many people that was distracting." because people were worried about my safety. Now, by late June, the parish surveys on virtual worship that had been invited came in. Having spent a lot of time analyzing, here are what we found in regard to two of the questions. The first was, what do you like best about the virtual worship services you've attended? 39 people in particular answered that question. And as you can see, what comes up at the top is liturgical leadership and ministers, the great variety of people participating in liturgical roles, the music and the choir that they've known, the great care and effort, the sermons live and YouTube that continue to be powerful, the overall creativity in every possible way. Next came community, their sense of community as being very strong, seeing and hearing other people present, especially through emojis, comments, chats, and greetings. Worship, praying together, knowing that they were praying together at the same time. The visuals mattered as well. A variety of images and media, the sensory engagement helped people to really engage with worship. Photos of the sanctuary and of the pictures of the people in pews. The great variety of locations, indoors and outdoors, meant a big difference. And people described many of these services as beautiful and meaningful. They were also very personal. Some people were now able to attend worship for the first time, or they were able to attend when they had now lived far away. It was convenient. They didn't have to change their pajamas, but also it was very important that there was safety during COVID-19. They spoke of spiritual support and feeling a connection to God, and we're grateful for the use of technologies, integration of media, and the production. Now, the next question was, what is the biggest challenge you've experienced regarding virtual worship? And 38 answered this question. And overall, the big deal was technology glitches, connectivity issues, interruptions, but also the great challenge of missing being with the community physically, the people that they long to see. And of course, there were distractions. Some people didn't realize they could turn the comments off on Facebook Live. Some people found the media too busy, or there might be background noise in one of the recordings. Some were challenged by juggling their phone and their computer and whatever else they had in hand. But people also felt, boy, I wish I could leave the house. I could be in the physical space. But for some, especially those who usually go to the 11 o'clock, it was a little too early in the morning for worship. And some of them have a hard time paying attention and staying awake because it was just a little too early. And one person said they were actually unable to watch because they didn't have Facebook. Now, there was another question on that same survey asking about suggestions, and I can tell you that as of this week, the church has incorporated every suggestion that was given. Now, we're up to week 17, believe it or not, June 28th, fourth Sunday after Pentecost, and finally, the video recording of this liturgy was back in the church, and Father Andrew did an incredibly humorous explanation beforehand of what changes to expect when you return to the sanctuary. Online worship was to remain and still remains primary, even though now we have an 8 a.m. liturgy again, which only 8 people attended the first week, which is kind of typical. The 11 a.m. liturgy, which is usually packed, had only 7 people, and of course people had to reserve a space to do that. But this week they were full force talking about the green lining campaign and the challenge to build housing and to raise $215,000 for the beginning of that effort. And the head of that program in North Lawndale actually got to speak on video to us in our own homes, and it made a big difference. But on that very same Sunday, when Ansel Dorian, a young fellow, yelled out, "Our church," when he saw the prelude, there were also tears. Seeing the beautiful church is making me cry. Happy to see our sanctuary, but missing it deeply. This production is harsh and lovely. I beat you all as I was sobbing during the processional, but you knew that already. I'm tearing up too, another said. Another can't sing much during the tears. Or just crying. Beautiful, but really hurts. Oh, I miss my community more than ever today. And I have to say, this outpouring of grief caught me up short and is why I've entitled this commentary, And Then They Cried. They cried for many reasons, of course. Grief for many, many things. They looked at this almost empty church and grieved for all that they had lost. July 5th, the fifth Sunday after Pentecost, we had another sermon about righteous anger to fire up the action for the green lining project. And people continued as they had been, wishing each other good morning at All Saints. Young people and old people were doing the readings. The choir continued to sing. We continued to have beautiful montages of birthdays and anniversaries. And by the sixth Sunday after Pentecost, week 19, just a few weeks ago, there was a postlude, which gave people time to say good morning, and there was a prelude, and there is now a postlude to give people time to say goodbye. And there continued to be lots and lots of comments. And the video that started the liturgy was one that helped bring people up the stairs of the church, through the front door of the church, as they heard the choir sing, and as people were singing at home. Still, the lay people were doing their part and doing every part that they possibly could. And because of the powerful preaching and because of the compassion about social justice, we had already reached 50% of the 215,000 needed for the green lighting campaign. Week 20, just 2 weeks ago, July 19th. We sang as we did many weeks, as we remember we are becoming what we see broken, we hope to be. Show us your mercy, show us your mercy harsh and lovely as the sea. A young woman, Kira, was this week's person to say how important it was that we contribute to the green lining campaign. And another young woman who was with the Lawndale Christian Development Corporation also got a chance to speak to us. Now, this wouldn't have been possible if we were not online. The project of the green lining was really important. And Father Ander explained to me, he said at first, as a parish, we were very focused inwardly on responding to the pastoral changes of the COVID-19 virus. We wanted to keep people connected, but as time went on, we knew that looking inwards was not the All Saints way. If we had been together in church, we'd be talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and we would get personally involved in the marches and protests as we have in the past. So we asked ourselves as a staff, what would we be doing in these circumstances if we were face-to-face together talking about what was happening in Chicago and the world? We have always been known for more than 25 years as a social justice-oriented parish. And just 2 days ago, the seventh Sunday after Pentecost, our parish and its online worship continued as it had been for many weeks. We knew we were getting close to the green lining goal. Of course, people greeted one another, so much so on Sunday, I started counting how many good mornings there were, and I counted 37, and I may have missed some. The preacher that day, the Reverend Courtney Reed, gave a brilliant sermon entitled Sourdough Starter, John Lewis and the Reign of God. People continued to wish each other peace at the time of the sign of peace. Readers recorded themselves with the sky and the city in the background. So it feels like we've gotten the hang of celebrating Eucharist online, even though we are still amateurs in media production. But we are not amateurs when it comes to raising funds for social justice projects. Last night, the interim rector gave good news to the Lawndale organizers. We had raised $228,000 in 4 weeks, 13,000 more than had been our goal. So we are still All Saints, as we were before COVID-19, with all the values and the ethos that we had before, just translated and mediated in a different way. We are still doing liturgy as the work of the people. And there are so many more stories I could tell because I've done a great deal of research, but I'll tell you in summary what 13 people told me in extensive interviews. When I asked them, have All Saints parishioners felt they have been really present, really participating, really celebrating Eucharist, which of course, as a liturgist, my question is always about full conscious active participation. Unanimously, they said yes. Have All Saints parishioners felt God present in their experience of Sunday Eucharist over these weeks online? Again, a resounding yes. Has All Saints as a community changed? Well, yes and no. It's always been a creative, loving community that reaches outward, as with the Ravenswood Community Services Program and the Green Lining Campaign. Many wrote that it seemed to be stronger now. Oddly, they said they felt closer. Going online has made All Saints liturgy more accessible to people, and people want to continue that in the future. And the online 9 o'clock liturgy is going to continue to be considered the main liturgy of this parish going forward through whenever the vaccine shows up and beyond, so that it can be accessible to as many people as possible. And no matter how much they love their church building, the people of All Saints know the true church is wherever 2 or 3 are gathered in Christ's name, and God's Spirit dwells in their midst. And they are convinced liturgy is the work of the people, whether that liturgy is in a dining room, sanctuary, or their own home, mediated by technology and social media. And they will continue to do that good work. I want to close with a quote from Episcopalian Barbara Brown Taylor in her article, Finding God Outside the Church Walls, because I think it's so relevant to All Saints. She writes, the Spirit is God's wild card, played over and over again, when old forms fail and old wells run dry, making way for new and surprising births to take place. I hope that's true for all of you.
Thank you very much. There we go. We're kind of back to our group. So again, invite any comments or questions, Daniela.
I have a comment. Eileen, thank you so much. I was very moved by your presentation. I had my little son with me looking at the pictures so that he'd be occupied mostly, but then he was fascinated. And I want to share with you, I was struck by the juxtaposition of the directive that came down from the Episcopalian version of the Chancery, whereby you can't have a gathering of a certain size and so on, versus what you were describing in people's homes and the various altar tables set up. And I'm deeply struck by just the movement of the Spirit in days such as these, sometimes despite of directives and kind of hardline circumstances. And I want to really, I have Gabriel here because I want to share with you about what he's been up to very briefly. So each Sunday he gets ready. We're making a comment, hold on. On each Sunday we get dressed up and he sets up our coffee table with his various candles and plates, and he calls it paten and chalice, which I'm very proud of, and corporal, and like he does the mass, and you know, we watch it on the iPad from the parish. And the first few weeks I thought, gosh, our house is chaos, there's toys everywhere, and like he's playing, half of it are his toys, and it's like no one's paying attention to Jesus. Whereas at the same time, I'm seeing people on Facebook like still dressed up in church clothes, a beautiful row of children watching the television in their homes. I'm like, this is not my household. But then I started he kept at it, and I'm thinking, my God, this is the Holy Spirit. This child is expressing his faith. This is godly play, even though I'm not instructing him to do it. So there's something really profound about the Spirit moving through these circumstances. And I just give you a little slice of what's happening in my household, and how this little 3-year-old is really like, in some ways, in some Sundays, like by his enthusiasm, sustaining the Spirit in me and my husband, who are very sad not to be in church. You know, so I resonated with that aspect of your presentation and those pictures. And I think there is something, not in contrast to like directives, but in maybe to round them out, show like how church is still happening, especially in the domestic context where we've all like, as to do these things at home. So thank you.
You're welcome. I'm glad your son is enjoying Sundays.